Okay, so have you ever felt like you're kind of like wading through this whole world of business growth? You're like, I feel like there's got to be a better way to get to the top besides just like endless hustle, right? Like there's got to be some secret formula or something that like all these super successful companies are using that you just haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, I think everyone feels that way, right? Like when you're trying to grow something significant,
Yeah.
you kind of get that feeling that there must be a more strategic path.
Well, yeah, welcome to the deep dive, because that's kind of what we're trying to do here, right? We're like
Yeah.
illuminating that path, right? We're like, okay, so we're taking this, collection of sources and we're really diving deep into them, right? So today, primarily, we're going to be looking at the book From Impossible to Inevitable. It's by Aaron Ross and Jason Lemkin. And the whole goal here is to extract that like crucial knowledge and to help you, the learner, really understand what drives rapid growth, right? Because I know you guys value clarity and efficiency, and we're all about those like aha moments, right?
Yeah, we're trying to find those patterns, right? The
Yeah.
patterns that like separate that like explosive growth from just like incremental progress.
Totally, totally. And so today, specifically, our mission is how do you achieve like hyper growth, like massive growth and predictable revenue? Okay. And this is specifically in like SaaS and other similar business models, right? So we're not talking about some like theoretical stuff, right? We want to give you actionable insights that you can use, right? Like right now, whether you're getting ready for a big meeting or, you're just trying to figure out what's going on in business or, you're just curious about how these companies operate.
Yeah, like basically we're trying to get the wisdom from people who've actually been there and done it.
Right. Exactly. So you guys are here for the stuff that actually works, right? We're not trying to overload you with information. So let's just get right into it. Let's jump into some of the like biggest ideas from impossible to inevitable, right? Let's start with something I think a lot of people believe, which is that like hypergrowth is all about just hard work,
Right.
or maybe, luck or something like that.
Right. But I think it's easy to get into that trap of thinking that just because you're putting in a ton of effort,
Yeah.
you're going to get these huge results. And, dedication is obviously important, but it's rarely the only thing that's going to make you grow exponentially.
Yeah, exactly. So the book argues that like these fast growing companies, they're not just working harder, they're following this like template. It's not like a magic formula, but it's this set of fundamental strategies, right?
Yeah.
That are applied consistently and effectively. And the cool thing is you can potentially achieve 2 to 10 times faster growth if you follow these like honorable and sustainable methods.
And I think that honorable and sustainable part is really important, right? Because it's about building something that's going to last. It's about creating genuine value, and it's about thinking long term, right? It's not about just chasing those quick wins at any cost.
Totally. Yeah. So where does this journey begin? I mean, if you want to achieve hypergrowth, like where do you start?
Well, according to Ross and Lemkin, it all starts with mailing a niche. In fact, they have this figure in the book, it's figure 2.2, and it basically visually shows you, like emphasizes this idea that it's about understanding your customer. It's not just about obsessing over your product.
And I think that's a really big change for a lot of businesses, right? Because it's so tempting to just focus on how amazing your product is or how many features it has. But at the end of the day, it's really the market that decides if it's actually solving a problem that people care enough about to pay for. Right, exactly. So as to show this, Aaron Ross, he talks about his own experience, right? He was able to increase his income like tenfold. And he did this by like hyper specializing in outbound prospecting services for B2B companies. So these were companies that had over like $1 million in revenue, but they had this critical need for lead generation. And he makes this really interesting distinction between his passion projects, things that he enjoyed that gave him purpose and freedom, and what the market was actually willing to pay a lot of money for. And for him, it was this reliable revenue generation.
It's like the difference between need and nice.
Yeah.
Right? Like you might be super excited about some idea, but if it's not addressing a real problem that people are willing to pay to solve, it's going to be a tough sell.
Totally, yeah. So things like purpose and freedom are cool and all, but what businesses really cared about was their bottom line, right? And so the book emphasizes that it's really important to pick just one thing to focus on initially, right? You want to become a big fish in a small pond before you try to like dominate this huge market. You got to get some traction first.
It's like building a solid foundation, right? If you try to be everything to everyone from the start, you're just going to spread yourself too thin. You're not going to have that clear identity in the market.
Totally. So how do you find that niche, right? How do you pinpoint it? Well, the authors give you these 5 criteria to evaluate. So first, is there like significant pain? Is there a problem that your potential customer base is experiencing that you can actually solve, right? Second, is there enough size? Are there enough potential customers in this niche to make it worth your time, right? Third, are these targets reachable? Can you actually get in touch with them? Can you identify them? Fourth, what's your unique genius? What do you do that's different? What do you do that's like better than everyone else? And fifth, is there money? Can they pay for your solution?
Yeah, those 5 criteria are like a checklist, right?
Mhm.
It helps you make sure that you're not just picking a random group of people, but you're actually picking a group of people who have a problem that's big enough that you can reach them, that you have something unique to offer them, and that they can actually pay you.
Exactly. And once you have a potential niche, right, they have this interesting piece of advice. They say, assume you are marketing to fourth graders. And they're not saying that your audience is dumb, right? They're just saying, look, we all have limited attention spans these days, right? You have to be super clear, you got to be concise, and your message has to be actionable. If it's not, they're going to tune out.
Yeah, it's like in today's world, right? We're just bombarded with information all the time. So you really got to cut through all that noise. If people don't immediately get what you're offering, they're going to move on.
Totally, yeah. And related to that is this idea of selling money. You have to be able to articulate how your solution will help them financially, right? Will it help them make more money? Will it help them save money? Will it help them reduce risk? You got to quantify those outcomes.
Yeah, because if you can show them the return on investment, right, you're speaking their language, you're showing them how your solution is going to help them achieve their business objectives. It's not about the cost, it's about the value.
Right. And they give this really good example to really drive home this point. They talk about this company, ACME Corp. It's this $15 million SaaS company, right? And they were struggling. They tried to do outbound lead generation, but they just couldn't make it work. And you know what their mistake was? They didn't have a targeted approach. They were just trying to get as many leads as possible, but they weren't really thinking about if those leads were actually qualified.
Yeah, and that's so common, right? It's like this spray and pray approach. You're just throwing stuff out there and hoping something sticks. But it just leads to wasted resources and a frustrated sales team because they're chasing all these dead ends.
Yeah, exactly. So before you commit to a niche, they have this rule they call the 20 interview rule. Basically, you have to have these in-depth conversations with at least 20 potential customers in your niche, right? And you have to really try to understand their pain points. What kind of solutions are they looking for? What results do they want to see?
Yeah, it's like doing your homework, right? You got to get out there and actually talk to people. Don't just assume you know what they want. Ask them. And you might be surprised by what you learn. You might even uncover some needs that you hadn't even thought of before.
Totally, yeah. Okay, so let's say you've done the work, you've nailed your niche. What's next? Well, the book really emphasizes customer success. And they talk about this idea of seeds, which is basically organic growth, right? It's when your happy customers start telling other people about you.
Yeah, it's word of mouth marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's the best kind of marketing,
Yeah.
but it's not something that just happens by accident. You have to actively cultivate it. You have to create a system that encourages your customers to become advocates for your business.
Exactly, yeah. So they say that retaining your customers, it's not just good customer service, it's the easiest revenue that you can generate. Happy customers will refer you new business, right?
Yeah.
Will spend more money with you. And to get those seeds, to cultivate them, you need a systematic approach. And that's where customer success management comes in.
Yeah, it's about being proactive, right? It's about helping your customers achieve their desired outcomes. You don't want to just wait for them to have a problem and then react. You want to anticipate their needs and be there for them every step of the way. It's like a partnership.
Totally. So they give us 6 key pillars of customer success, right? First, it has to be a priority. It can't just be lip service, right? Everyone in the organization, from sales to product development, has to be on board. Second, you got to aim for net negative churn. And this is huge, right? Net negative churn basically means that the increased revenue you get from your existing customers is more than the revenue you lose from customers who churn. So even if you lose some customers, your overall revenue from your existing customer base is still growing. Third, you got to have a good CSM to revenue ratio. They recommend having one customer success manager for every $2 million in annual recurring revenue. Fourth, you got to visit your customers, like in person, right? They have this 5+2 rule, which means that you should be aiming for 5 virtual interactions and 2 in-person visits per year. Fifth, you got to make sure that there's like financial accountability, right? Make sure that your customer success team is aligned with revenue goals. And sixth, you got to listen to your customers, right? Pay attention to the feedback that you're getting, especially from your support teams, because they're the ones who are talking to customers every day.
Yeah, and those 6 keys, I mean, they really lay out the foundation for building a company that's really focused on the customer. And I think the financial accountability part is really important because it shows that you're serious about this. It's not just a side project, it's a core part of your business strategy.
Totally. And they give us a really good example of Guild, right? Guild was able to dramatically reduce their churn, and they did this by doing 3 things. They implemented a 90-day adoption program for new customers, right? So they wanted to make sure that those new customers were getting value right away. They created tiered CSM roles so they could provide different levels of support based on the customer's needs and the value of the customer. And they made sure that they were constantly listening to customer feedback, right? So they were proactively trying to identify and address problems.
Yeah, that 90-day adoption program is so smart, right? If you can get people to see value in your product quickly, they're way more likely to stick around. And the tiered CSM approach, that's a really good way to scale your customer success efforts as you grow.
Totally.
Totally.
Okay, so we've talked about finding the right customers and making sure they're successful. Now let's talk about sales, right? The book says that specialization is the #1 sales multiplier. And their main point here is that salespeople shouldn't be wasting their time on prospecting.
Yeah, and that might sound kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a small company.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you want to make sure that everyone's doing what they're best at, right? You want to optimize your sales process.
Exactly. And they talk about how multitasking actually hurts your sales performance. They say that 90% of salespeople who try to do everything, like prospecting, closing deals, managing accounts, they end up doing most of those things poorly.
It's because different parts of the sales process require different skills, right? Some people are amazing at finding new leads, but they might not be so good at closing deals. And some people are amazing closers, but they might not be so good at prospecting. So it makes sense to have people specialize in the areas where they excel.
Totally. And they give this example of Clio, right? Clio used to have this model where their salespeople were like generalists, they did everything, but then they decided to restructure their sales team. They created specialized roles. They had SDRs, which are outbound sales development reps, and their job was just to prospect. Then they had account executives, and their job was just to close deals. And then they had this engagement team, and their job was to nurture inbound leads and handle smaller deals. And the results were amazing. They had more deals, they had better collaboration, and they had better communication within the sales team.
I think that collaboration part is key, right? When everyone knows what they're responsible for, it's easier to work together. You're not stepping on each other's toes. You're supporting each other.
Exactly. So a natural question is, can a company be too small to specialize? Or can it be too large to specialize? And the book addresses this. They say that, yeah, obviously it's more complex to implement specialization in a large company just because there are more people and more processes. But the principle still applies. You still want to focus people on their strengths. And even small teams can start to specialize as they grow.
Yeah, even if you're just a few people, you can still start thinking about who's good at what.
Right.
And as you grow, you can formalize those roles.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've talked about the basics, right? Nailing your niche, customer success, sales specialization. Now let's talk about the challenges, because it's not always easy, right? Part 5 of From Impossible to Inevitable talks about this. They say, look, everybody has a year of hell at some point during the growth journey.
And I think that's really important to hear, right? Because it's so easy to think that you're the only one who's struggling. But the reality is that everyone goes through tough times. It's part of the process.
Totally, yeah. And they say that staying in your comfort zone, it feels safe, right? But it's actually the enemy of growth. If you want to achieve big things, you have to be willing to push yourself beyond your comfort zone. You have to be willing to make changes.
And they even talk about this idea of the anxiety economy, right? And entrepreneur depression. They're referencing some studies that show that entrepreneurs actually have higher rates of certain mental health conditions, but they have this really interesting take on it. They say that these challenges, they can actually be a source of strength. They can give you a unique perspective. They can even make you more creative.
Yeah, it's like flipping the script, right? And instead of thinking of these challenges as purely negative, they're saying, hey, maybe they're actually a gift in disguise. Maybe they're helping you to become more resilient.
Exactly. And then they talk about this question that Mark Suster asks. He says, should a person learn or earn? And I think that's a really good question for anyone to ask themselves, right? Are you focusing on making money right now, or are you investing in your future by learning new skills? Are you on the right path to achieve your long-term goals?
It's all about being intentional with your time and energy, right? What are you prioritizing? And then they give this piece of advice, which is to change your world, not the world. They're saying, don't get bogged down in trying to solve these massive abstract problems. Focus on creating value for your customers right here, right now.
It's about being pragmatic. Right. Focus on what you can actually control. You can't change the whole world, but you can make a difference in the lives of your customers.
Totally. Okay, so now let's talk about ownership. In part 6 and 7 of the book, they talk about this. And they introduce this idea of functional ownership. It's about giving your employees a sense of ownership, even if they don't have equity in the company. The idea is that people are more invested in something if they feel like they have a stake in it.
Yeah, it's like that saying, right? People support what they help create.
Exactly. And they even have this simple survey that executives can use to see how their employees feel about ownership. Are they empowered? Do they feel like they have a voice?
It's about being proactive and
Yeah.
getting feedbacks from your team.
Right.
You want to create a culture where people feel like they can take ownership and make a difference.
Totally. And they talk about these 4 types of employees. They have the CEOs, which are the people who are like natural leaders, right? They take initiative. Then they have the careerists, and they're the people who are ambitious. They want to grow. They want to learn. Then they have the complainers and the clockers. And they say, look, you want to focus on your CEOs and your careerists. They're the ones who are going to help you grow your business.
It's about playing to your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You want to invest in the people who are already motivated and engaged.
Right, exactly. And they have this really interesting point. They say that you probably have a bigger opportunity at work than you realize. And they encourage you to expand that opportunity, right? Learn new skills, go above and beyond in your role, and even reframe challenges as learning experiences.
Well,
even bad managers, right? Think of them as an opportunity to learn how not to manage.
Yeah, it's all about having a growth mindset,
Ah.
right? Don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to take on new challenges. And don't let setbacks get you down. Learn from them and move on.
Totally, yeah. And then they talk about this idea of developing humdrum passions. So basically, it's about getting really good at these essential skills that maybe aren't super glamorous, right? Like making your customers successful, understanding how to make money. These aren't necessarily the things that are going to get you on the cover of a magazine, but they're the things that are going to help you build a solid career.
Yeah, it's like those foundational skills that everyone needs, right? No matter what industry you're in, if you can master those, you'll always be in demand.
Totally. And then they talk about forcing functions. So this is a way to basically trick yourself into doing the things that you know you need to do, but you just don't want to do, right? So it's about creating these commitments that are totally in your control and then telling other people about them so that you feel accountable.
Yeah, it's like creating external pressure to help you stay on track.
Right, exactly. And then they wrap up the book by talking about sales. They say that sales is a life skill and it's a multi-step process. And they say that the most important thing you can do is ask yourself, what will it take to achieve your goal? So you have to break it down into steps, right? And you have to be willing to do the work. And they say that it all comes back to your unique genius. What is it that you do better than anyone else? What problem can you solve that no one else can solve?
Yeah, it's about leveraging your strengths.
Yeah.
Right. And finding a way to use them to create value for others.
Totally. So to sum up, right, we talked about a lot of stuff today. We talked about the importance of nailing your niche, making sure your customers are successful, building specialized sales teams, embracing challenges, and taking ownership of your opportunities.
Yeah. And these are all really important principles, right? They're not just theoretical concepts. They're things that you can actually apply in your own work.
Exactly. And for you, the learner, hopefully this has given you some actionable insights that you can use to grow your business, your career, whatever it is you're trying to do. Now, as you think about everything we talked about today, I want you to consider this. What is one humdrum passion, one of those unsexy but essential skills that you could develop that might actually unlock your next level of growth?
That's a really good question to think about, right?
Correct.
It's easy to get caught up in the flashy stuff, but sometimes it's the simple things that make the biggest difference.
Totally, yeah. And for those of you watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please let us know in the comments. Tell us what you learned. Tell us what you're going to do differently. Ask us any questions that you have. And don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel, Book Reviews 1, for more deep dives like this.
We really appreciate your support.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.